It begins with a question. What makes a man who once called Christianity a fairy tale become one of the most powerful voices for the Christian faith in the modern world? What turns a skeptic into a witness whose words still ignite hope across generations? This is the story of Clive Staples Lewis, known to millions as C.S. Lewis, scholar, writer, storyteller, and above all, a man pursued by God's relentless love. The story begins on a gray November morning in Belfast, Ireland, 1898. A small stone house stands firm against the chill, and inside, the cry of a newborn breaks through the quiet. His parents, Albert and Florence Lewis, cradled their second son, Clive Staples Lewis. But from the beginning, the boy resists the name he's given. At 4 years old, after the death of a beloved dog named Jaxie, he insists on being called Jack. No pleading or correction from family will change his mind. To the end of his life, the world will know him as Jack. Jack grows up surrounded by books. His father's study is overflowing with them, towering shelves of classics, myths, histories, poetry. To Jack, these volumes are not decorations, but doors. He opens one and steps into a saga of Norse heroes, another into fairylands of enchantment. Words become his playground, and stories his companions. But life, as it often does, brings sorrow too soon. In 1908, when Jack is only 9 years old, tragedy strikes. His mother, Florence, dies of cancer. The memory sears itself into his heart. He has prayed for her healing, clung to hope, and yet she slips away. The bright warmth of home collapses into cold absence. His father, consumed by grief, grows distant. Jack, left adrift, turns inward. He and his brother Warren retreat into imagination, inventing entire kingdoms, Boxen and Animal Land, where they are rulers, chroniclers, and heroes. But yet, as imagination thrives, faith begins to crumble. Jack has prayed, but the prayer seemed unanswered. The God his mother had trusted now feels silent, if not cruel. Boarding school life only deepens the wound. At Wynyard School, a place of rigid discipline and harsh punishments, he is small, sickly, and often bullied. The days are long and joyless, the nights cold and lonely. When the headmaster is eventually declared insane, it feels to Jack like the symbol of the senselessness he sees all around him. Later schools bring better teaching, but little comfort. By his mid-teens, he reads philosophy and poetry that challenge Christian belief, and soon he casts it aside altogether. By 15, he is a convinced atheist, even writing in a letter that he is very angry with God for not existing. Yet, in the shadows of unbelief, something stirs. While reading Norse myths or listening to music, Jack sometimes feels a sudden, piercing pang of longing. It is not mere pleasure, but a deeper ache, as if he glimpses another world just beyond reach. He names it joy. It is fleeting, but unforgettable, like a half-remembered dream. Though he denies God, this strange yearning keeps haunting him. In 1917, with Europe engulfed in the Great War, Jack wins a scholarship to Oxford, but never gets the chance to begin. Duty calls. He enlists as an officer in the British Army, joining the Somerset Light Infantry. Training is harsh, but nothing prepares him for the trenches of France. The mud clings to everything, rats scurry in the dark, and the air reeks of death. Artillery shells thunder day and night, shaking the earth. On April 15, 1918, during the Battle of Arras, Jack is struck by shrapnel. A fellow soldier beside him is killed instantly, another severely wounded. Jack himself is knocked unconscious, wounded but alive. He spends months recovering in hospital. The war leaves scars not only in his body, but deep in his spirit. The awe of mechanized slaughter, The senseless waste of youth, the silence of God, these press heavy on him. When the war ends, Jack returns to Oxford a changed man. Outwardly, he pursues excellence with fierce determination. He studies classics, philosophy, and English literature, earning high honors in each. He becomes a tutor at Magdalen College, where students are struck by his booming voice, quick wit, and razor-sharp mind. But inwardly, he is restless. He buries himself in reason, intellect, and teaching. Faith is nowhere in sight. Yet that mysterious longing, joy, has not left him. At unexpected moments, while reading poetry or while gazing at a landscape, he feels it again. It is both delight and wound, beauty and wound. He cannot dismiss it, but he cannot explain it either. For now, he hardens himself with intellect, insisting God is a myth. But already, the pursuit of his soul has begun. Books begin to unsettle his certainty. One evening, he picks up George MacDonald's Phantastes, a Christian fantasy novel. He expects pleasant storytelling. Instead, he is pierced. Something in its pages awakens a sense of holiness. It baptized my imagination, he later says. Though he resists, a seed is planted. Other writers follow. G.K. Chesterton, whose wit and logic unsettle Jack's atheism. In The Everlasting Man, Chesterton argues that Christianity is not a myth like the rest, but the story that makes sense of all myths. Jack feels the ground beneath him shift. He later admits, a young man who wishes to remain a sound atheist cannot be too careful of his reading. God is pursuing him, book by book, idea by idea. And then friends arrive. Warren, his brother, notices Jack's slow change, but it is at Oxford that two men become catalysts: Hugo Dyson, a Christian scholar, and John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, the devout Catholic who one day will write The Lord of the Rings. Lewis and Tolkien bond over myth, language, and storytelling. They meet often, talking late into the night about Norse sagas and medieval legends. Yet their friendship is not only literary. Tolkien sees Jack's hunger beneath the skepticism. He gently insists that Christianity is not the enemy of myth, but its fulfillment. The pivotal night comes in September 1931. Jack, Tolkien, and Dyson walk under the moonlight along Addison's Walk, the tree-lined path at Magdalen College. Autumn leaves crunch beneath their feet, and their conversation turns to myth.
Lewis argues that myths are lies, beautiful lies, but lies nonetheless. He loves them but cannot believe them. Tolkien stops him. He says, myths are not lies. They are the way we see truth in story form. And then he presses deeper. The story of Christ is the one true myth, the myth that became fact. The God who created all stories stepped into history, lived, died, and rose again. The words strike Lewis like a blade of light. Suddenly, all the longings of his imagination, all the pangs of joy, all the myths he had cherished, they converge. Could it be that Christianity is not a false myth, but the truth all myths had been pointing toward? He cannot sleep. He wrestles. For days, the conversation echoes in his mind. Then, in 1929, alone in his rooms at Magdalen, Lewis surrenders. I gave in, he writes. Perhaps that night, I was the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England. He had resisted as long as he could, but the weight of truth crushed his defenses. He knelt and prayed, acknowledging that God is God. Yet even then, he does not rush into Christianity. It takes 2 more years before the final step. In 1931, while riding in the sidecar of Warren's motorcycle to the Whipsnade Zoo, Jack realizes something has shifted. When they set out, he does not believe that Jesus is the Son of God. By the time they arrive, he does. No visions, no thunderclaps, just the quiet but unshakable recognition of truth. At last, the reluctant convert becomes a Christian. The change is real, and it spreads through every corner of his life. His imagination, once wandering, is now baptized. His reason, once hardened, is now softened by grace. His pride begins to give way to humility. Oxford still sees the sharp-minded tutor, but behind closed doors, Jack is becoming a man of prayer. Soon he begins to write, not only scholarly works, but books of faith. His pen, sharpened by years of skepticism, now defends the truth he once rejected. The reluctant convert has become a witness. The year is 1939. War breaks out again in Europe. Oxford, with its dreaming spires and libraries, suddenly feels fragile against the thunder of Hitler's armies. Air raid sirens wail across Britain. Families huddle in basements. The skies above London burn. C.S.Lewis, now a believer, feels the weight of responsibility. He is no soldier this time, but he has words, and words can steady hearts in chaos. He begins speaking on the BBC. Picture it: blackout curtains drawn tight, families gathered around radios, bombs falling in the distance, and through the crackling broadcast, a voice, clear, warm, unpretentious, rings out. It is Jack Lewis. He is not a preacher thundering from a pulpit, but a companion speaking plainly, like a friend in the room. He explains Christianity with disarming clarity, not lofty theology, not abstract arguments, but everyday language, right and wrong, good and evil, hope and despair. He tells listeners that morality is not a matter of preference, but a reflection of God's law written on human hearts. You find out more about God from the moral law than from the universe in general. His words reach soldiers in the trenches, mothers grieving lost sons, children anxious in shelters. To millions, he becomes a guide through the darkness. These talks are later collected into a book, Mere Christianity. It is not flashy, not complicated. It is the essence of the faith, laid out step by step, logical and luminous. Even today, it remains one of the most influential Christian books of the 20th century. But Lewis does not only speak of God's truth in abstract terms. He imagines it, dramatizes it, exposes it in unexpected ways. In 1942, he publishes Screwtape Letters. It is a shocking concept, a series of letters from a senior demon, Screwtape, advising his apprentice Wormwood on how to tempt a human soul. With wit and piercing insight, Lewis reveals how pride, distraction, fear, and pleasure are twisted by the enemy of souls. Readers laugh, cringe, and repent all at once. The book becomes a sensation. Some are startled. How can a Christian write from a demon's perspective? But others recognize the brilliance. Lewis has pulled back the curtain on spiritual warfare in a way no sermon could. Amid the war, Lewis also opens his home to children evacuated from London. 4 children, wide-eyed and frightened, come to stay at his house, the Kilns. Watching them explore the countryside and the old wardrobe in the hall sparks something in his imagination. A story begins to form of children who stumble into another world where a great lion reigns and where good and evil clash in eternal struggle.
In 1950, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is published. At first, critics are uncertain. A children's fantasy from a respected Oxford don, but children devour it. They understand what adults often miss. Aslan, the great lion, is more than a character. He is Christ in story form. When Aslan lays down his life for Edmund, then rises again, young readers encounter the gospel dressed in myth and wonder. The book becomes the first of 7 in the Chronicles of Narnia. Over the next years, Lewis writes them with astonishing speed and inspiration. Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, The Horse and His Boy, The Magician's Nephew, and finally, The Last Battle. Each whispers eternal truths through story. Children read them at bedtime. Adults rediscover childlike faith in their pages, and generations step through the wardrobe into a world that points to the world beyond. By the 1950s, Lewis is one of the most famous Christian voices in the English-speaking world. His books sell widely, his lectures draw crowds, his radio talks echo long after the bombs have ceased. Yet he remains unpretentious, often walking the streets of Oxford in shabby clothes, smoking his pipe, and enjoying beer at the Eagle and Child pub with Tolkien and the rest of the Inklings. Fame does not change him much. If anything, it makes him more wary of pride. But though the world sees his success, Lewis himself carries sorrows. He never fully escapes the wounds of childhood or the shadows of war. Loneliness lingers. For years he remains single, pouring himself into teaching and writing. He cares for Mrs. Moore, the mother of a fallen war friend, in a complex, difficult household arrangement that costs him peace but reflects his loyalty. He is not a saint in marble, but a man of flesh and flaws. And then, when he is past 50, something unexpected happens. He meets Joy Davidman, an American writer, sharp-minded, witty, with a faith that challenges him. They correspond, then meet, then slowly, quietly, fall in love. For Jack, who had resigned himself to a bachelor's life, it feels like a miracle. They marry in 1956. For a few brief years, he tastes happiness he never thought possible. But the story of Joy is one of both glory and grief. Not long after their marriage, Joy is diagnosed with cancer. Doctors predict her death within months. Lewis is devastated. He had just found love, and now it seems he must lose it. Yet he prays, clings to hope, and against all expectation, Joy goes into remission. They enjoy several radiant years together, traveling, laughing, writing, living as though every day is a gift. Still, the illness returns. In 1960, Joy dies in his arms. Lewis is shattered. He pours out his agony in a small book, A Grief Observed. It is raw, almost brutal in its honesty. He admits his anger at God, his fear, his emptiness. Readers are startled. This great defender of Christianity sounds like he is doubting everything. But that is the truth of grief. It strips away all pretenses. Yet even here, God holds him. Slowly, painfully, Lewis finds that his faith, though shaken, still stands. By the early 1960s, Lewis is weary, his health is faltering, kidneys weak, his body aged beyond his years. Since Joy's passing, the house at the Kilns feels both sacred and heavy with absence. Yet he continues to write, answer letters, and meet students. Friends notice a gentler spirit in him. Once sharp and quick to debate, he now speaks with more quiet warmth. Suffering has softened his edges. He still enjoys laughter, still walks with Warren in the Oxford countryside, still meets a few old friends in pubs, but the once vigorous public voice is fading into a quieter season. By 1961, he collapses with illness and barely survives. Though he rallies, those closest to him know the end is drawing near. He spends his remaining days quietly at home, with Warren faithfully by his side. The reluctant convert, the apologist, the storyteller. His life's great chapters are nearly finished. The final page waits to be turned. In 1963, C.S. Lewis is visibly frail. He no longer travels, no longer teaches. His world has grown smaller, just the Kilns, a few visitors, and the steady care of his brother. He spends his days reading, praying, and writing short letters to those who still seek his counsel. On November 22, 1963, at 3:30 in the afternoon, his journey ends. He slips into unconsciousness at home and passes peacefully. He is 64 years old. The same day, President John F. Kennedy is assassinated, and Aldous Huxley dies as well. The headlines of the world barely notice Lewis, but in the unseen realm, heaven welcomes a pilgrim who has finally come home. He is buried at Holy Trinity Church in Headington Quarry, Oxford. On his gravestone are carved the words, "Men must endure their going hence," a quiet epitaph for a man whose words still thunder across generations. And now we reflect. Lewis's life is not simply a record of brilliance or fame. It is the story of a soul pursued by grace, a skeptic turned witness, a man who suffered deeply, yet found in Christ a joy stronger than sorrow. His story tells us this: no one is beyond the reach of God. Doubt does not disqualify you. Pain does not disprove him. The very longings you feel, the ache for beauty, the hunger for meaning, the piercing moments of joy, are signposts pointing to Christ. Friend, Lewis discovered that surrender to God is not the end of freedom, but its beginning. And that same invitation stands for you today. Christ is not a myth. He is reality. If this story has moved you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs hope. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and join us as we tell more stories of faith that stir hearts and lift eyes to God. These are not tales of the past. They are reminders that the same God is alive and at work today.